I know it's late, but can we talk for some time about The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells? Because I read it quite recently and it's fantastic. I also don't have the book on me at the moment, so my hands are like mentally screaming because usually I hold up the book and I'm like blah 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 blah, but I don't have the book. So, The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells, the being an important qualifier so that we don't confuse it with Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, which I am also very on board with reading at some point. But no, the science fiction classic, this was my introduction to H.G. Wells. And I was nervous because he's one of those iconic writers that I was sort of saving for a rainy day, much like Jane Austen, although I think this summer I will be having like a Jane Austen summer, so stay tuned. But I didn't know where to start with H.G. Wells. I thought, like, do I go into like War of the Worlds? Do I go into like The Time Machine, like one of his more iconic ones? But then I thought, you know what, The Invisible Man, it's closer, in my mind, it's closer to like horror, and that's the sort of stuff that I like to read. And it delivered everything I wanted. It was perfect. You know, you can say, oh Alfie, you just love classics. No, it was good. It was a very good book. For me, the best part was that you could just tell that he'd thought about it. And that, especially these days, so valuable when you can just tell that, like, the length and breadth of this topic, the story itself, the writer spent sleepless nights thinking about it, you know, just really turning it over in their mind, figuring out the minutiae of how's it going to work, especially in something like science fiction where it is so experimental and it does depend so much on the imagination, but also like logic and things playing out properly. He had thought about it, and I love that. Like, I hate to be the grouchy old man that tells like modern authors to get off my lawn, but there's too many books nowadays where you could just tell they haven't thought about it, or at least they haven't thought about it enough. And so you mentally, I mean, if you're as anally retentive as I am, you're doing the accounting and you're looking at the numbers, and you're like, this isn't adding up. This book, I was like, you know what? Even when there were issues, he addressed them. Like in the foreword, they literally talk about how, scientifically speaking, an invisible man would be blind because no light would be touching his retina. If all the light is not going anywhere near his retina, he wouldn't be able to see. And H.G. Wells, his Invisible Man is not blind, but he addresses that shortcoming, and I love that. I love that self awareness. Like, where has that gone in modern writing? But yes, our main character Griffin has completed a science experiment that has gone horribly wrong, and it's very much like a grass is greener situation. You know, like he wanted to achieve invisibility, thinking that he would become this like indomitable master who could get away with anything, only to then realize how many issues there are with being invisible. Like, he can't wear any clothes. Like, if he doesn't want to be seen, he has to be completely naked, which in a country like Great Britain, very cold, not the best idea. Um, so he then has to seek refuge in other people's homes, you know, just to get some warmth. And he also can't eat anything because until it's been like physically assimilated into his own body, you can see anything that he's eaten or drinking. So he basically has to starve himself if he wants to maintain stealth. And it's just those little idiosyncrasies where I'm like, wow, like you really thought about this. And like, I see you, H.G. Wells. Like, nerd to nerd, I see you. The story is more of an ethical dilemma than anything else. Science fiction often goes into like the thought experiment side of things where you're having a discussion that has parallels to your own life. And this is very similar, where it's like, if you could go invisible and you could do whatever you wanted, would you? Like, if you knew that the terrible things that you've always wanted to do, you could get away with them and nobody would be none the wiser, would you do them? It's very much that issue where it's like, are people good people or are they just bad people that know they're being watched? It's a similar sort of thing that in medical school, professionalism excuse me, professionalism is defined as doing the right thing when you know no one is watching, and that's exactly what happens here with Griffin. He is a character where no one is ever watching him now, and so he has carte blanche to do despicable things. Does he end up doing them? It's very similar to like Lord of the Rings, where if you put on the Ring of Power, you go invisible. Do you use that power for good or evil? And you know my reading taste. I like my books when they're terrible. I like people doing the most wretched things because I find that cathartic. You know, it doesn't make me then want to do wretched things in my actual life. And that's exactly what happens in this book. The last 50 pages are a pure delight. Seeing this invisible man's downward spiral, seeing Griffin realize, oh, I'm always going to struggle now with this affliction. I'm just going to have a reign of terror. Loved it. Loved it so much. The way he terrorizes this small English town, and they're just trying to figure out how they can even catch him because he's like smashing windows, he's killing innocent lives. Like it's aggressive, but I loved it. Because even though the Invisible Man as a concept probably existed before H.G. Wells came along, a lot of the things, like the idea to have him constantly be wrapped up in like bandages to conceal his identity as like an everyday person, that I think that was very much an H.G. Wells thing that then became much more famous in cinema, like black and white horror films of like the Invisible Man, having him wrapped up with the sunglasses and the prosthetic nose. Like that's such an iconic visual, and it largely comes from this book's inspiration, where he is lodging at this person's hotel, more like it's more like a bed and breakfast, but like he's telling the owner, oh yes, I have this terrible disease where my skin has to be covered, and it's all very bizarre. And I like that dichotomy where we as the reader know what's going on, we know he's invisible, but of course every other character is so stupefied by what's happening, and they are just like, well, what is under those bandages? We need to find out. Like I love the sort of play of that. So do I recommend The Invisible Man? What do you think? I mean, come on, no duh. H.G. Wells, it's science fiction perfected. Like he took the genre and did what nobody else had done with it before. And to finally read it and feel like vindicated by what other people have already said, I'm like, yes. This is my second 5-star book of the year, probably after The Emperor of Gladness. Love, love, love. So good. If you want a sci-fi classic that's short, readable, packs a punch though, like there's a lot going on, there's a lot to think about. Yes. Great book. This should be, I'm sure it is taught in schools, but I would have loved to have done this in English class. It would have been like unique compared to some of the other things that you do.